That's right. And that's the other thing we talked about how technology has changed. Okay. These people at 100 years of age, you know, well, in fact, one woman, I mentioned the fact that Ronald, there was a guy also, the guy that's retired from WHO that was over 100 years of age. And I said, well, you probably were there with Ronald Reagan and H.R. Gross. He said, no, Reagan had left 5 years before I went to work for WHO, but Zabel's still there.
Well, for our digital audience, I'm Rick Green. I'm editor of the Des Moines Register. We're here with our editorial board, as well as our esteemed guest, Governor of Iowa, Jerry Branstad, the Lieutenant Governor, as well, Kim Reynolds. We're going to spend the next hour or so talking about some of the most important issues in front of Iowa. Obviously, we would presume that you would want to talk about your most important one that you just unveiled today, related to education. If you don't mind, Governor, we'll just go around the table very quickly so you know exactly who all we have.
Thank you, Rick.
Rox Laird, editorial writer.
Kathy Obradovich, political columnist.
Carol Hunter, politics and state editor.
Sheena Dooley, education reporter.
Clark Kaufman, reporter.
Andy Dominic, editorial writer.
Laura Hollingsworth, president publisher.
Rika Basu, opinion columnist.
Kathy Bolton, national editor.
Okay, and you know our people here. I think you all know Linda Fannell pretty well. She's our special assistant for education in the governor's office, and then Tim Albrecht is our communications director. And the lieutenant governor and I tried to do a lot of things together. We were with press conference together this morning, and then also did our centenarian luncheon, and we actually are also doing a training session for new appointees, and that's going on today, and then we're having a reception at Terrace Hill tonight. If you don't mind, I'll just kind of start
Right, give you an opening statement or two.
by saying, first of all, why did I do this again? I had the honor of serving 16 years as governor, and a lot of people really question, well, why would you want to come back and do this again and you know, get into the political fray and all of the things that go with that? And I guess it's because I love this state, and I have a real passion for public service. I had a great job at Des Moines University. I loved what I was doing there. I think we really made a difference there, too. And I think that experience has helped me be better prepared to be governor this time than I was before, because I learned a lot about higher education and health care. And one of the things I'm most interested in is, as governor, well, first and foremost, we had a financial mess to straighten out, not unlike a lot of other states. And I've done that, and a lot of other governors are doing that across the country. We went through a tough session, but for the first time in a long time, I think we have a 5-year strategic budget plan, and it's balanced, and it's sustainable. Spending less than we take in each year, and it's using ongoing revenues for ongoing expenses. I think that's a big step forward from where we've been for the last 4 years. We're also working hard. I think the responsibility of a leader is to articulate a vision of where you want to lead the state, and then put together a strong team to accomplish that, people that share your vision and share your commitment. Also, I think it's critically important that we change the culture of government. Too many people feel mistreated by government, treated that they don't get treated with respect and dignity, that government is trying to exert unreasonable power or influence or playing gotcha with them. So I tried to recruit people that understand the importance of public service in the sense of being truly servants, not masters, but also that we have an obligation and a responsibility to work in collaboration to accomplish the things we want to accomplish to make this a better, healthier, more successful state. And I tried to lay out during the campaign some very clear vision of where I wanted to lead the state. Among those, of course, is to restore fiscal responsibility and focus on jobs. And so we're working very hard on that. And I just returned from a trade mission. We're very excited about our opportunities. This is an international, global economy. We can compete successfully in it. Education fits in with that because we need to have an education system that prepares our kids to compete in this global economy. And then also, part of that, to attract the business and jobs, we want to be the healthiest state in the country. So right now we've got some very exciting initiatives going forward. You know, we've got the Start Somewhere Walk coming up this week, And today, of course, we announced our unshakable vision for education in the future of the state. And one of your former colleagues, Linda, has played a very key role in that, working with our very energetic new Director of Education, Jason Glass. We held a very successful education summit late July. We brought people in from all over the state. We had some key people from other states and other countries that joined us. And out of that, we've put together a draft of recommendations on how we can really dramatically and systemically reform and improve education in Iowa. And we've laid that out now. And now the Lieutenant Governor and I, as well as Linda and Jason, will be doing a number of town hall meetings across the state to get feedback and to find out whether people think this is the right vision and if there's changes or adjustments that need to be made in it. And then once we've been able to hopefully reach a consensus on the direction we need to go, then put together a budget that will support accomplishing that over the next several years. And this is a big and systemic change, much bigger than anything that's been done before, and we recognize it's going to be an important and significant task. But I also feel Iowans care deeply about education. We have a lot of dedicated teachers and administrators and parents that care, that really want to have the best education for their kids and for future generations in this state. And we've had a long tradition in education, but we have really we've not kept up with some of the changes that have occurred in other states and other countries. Just in the last year, the states of Ohio, Indiana, and Illinois all passed major education reforms. Colorado had the year before. And we think that we in Iowa can do better than any of them if we do it well and we do it right. So with that, maybe I can just open it for your questions.
The way we would like to do just to have the editorial board ask a few questions.
Sure,
that we'll
absolutely.
As reporters. I guess I'll just start off. What's different about this iteration of this vision for shaking up the education system in Iowa versus its predecessors? Why has this been going to be successful, do you think?
First of all, you have experienced leader in the governor's office who's been through this before and understands this is no small task. Secondly, we have put, I think, a strong team together, a team of people that really are very passionate and very committed to making a difference. We've also reached out to try to involve all the key stakeholders in this. The Iowa State Education Association, the school administrators of Iowa, the business community, people like Iowa Business Council, the School Board Association, and we've also identified many other key people that care about education reform from other states that have helped us. My longtime friend, former governor of North Carolina, Jim Hunt, and many others. And today we also have the benefit of some research that's been done from some foundations and the benefit of some of the reforms that have occurred in other states. The state of Florida, for instance, put in place these reforms involving making sure that every child could read before they left third grade. And Florida has gone from being one of the poorest performing states to ahead of Iowa in third grade reading. That is a big change from where it was 10 years ago. And that's the kind of thing that we want to, and so that's where some of these ideas have come from, is from things that have worked elsewhere. But then we also want to look at what has worked here in Iowa, and that's why we've gotten a lot of input from local school districts and teachers. And what I found, there's a great passion for reform and improvement out there. We heard from teachers that said, we're excited about this, provided it's real and it's going to make systemic change, not just make some little changes along the edges.
How do you think the legislature is going to respond to this? Is there a political will, do you think, to change this, Governor?
I think there's more political will now than there was back in the 80s and 90s. We worked on this in those era, but I think now there's come to a realization other states have moved forward and passed reforms and we haven't. I think there's kind of an Iowa pride here that we're being surpassed and we need to get serious about doing something about it. We need to work together to accomplish it. So I think, I know the legislative process, and I know we have a split legislature, and it's not going to be an easy thing to get done. But I'm convinced that it can be accomplished, and I think we owe it to the kids of Iowa to give it our very best effort.
You said you've reached out to a number of groups, including teachers. Beyond individual teachers, what about the teachers' unions?
Absolutely. Linda can give you the details of that, but they have been kept informed and involved in this entire process. So the Iowa State Education Association, we've met with
Will you have them on your side, though, do you think?
I think we will on a lot of things. I don't think you can find any one group that's going to endorse absolutely everything here, but I think that as a general rule, I think there's interest and support among all of those groups. We had them all as sponsors of the summit. So we had the teachers and the administrators and the school board association and the business council and I don't know, 3 or 4 other groups that were all sponsors of the summit, and we've kept them involved through this process.
But as I read the plan, it looks like you're suggesting some major changes in the way teachers are paid and the way they work up through the hierarchy, et cetera.
Right. Yeah, if you're stuck on the 90-year-old, if you're really stuck on that we should do things the way they did them in Des Moines 90 years ago, then you probably don't like this. On the other hand, if you really want to be world-class competitive, I think maybe, the step-and-lane system was developed in Des Moines, and I guess was a great system when it was started 90 years ago, but I'm not sure that we ought to be doing things the way we did them 90 years ago. These 100-year-olds I just talked to, they were just kids 90 years ago. So I think, and with teachers, we're going to give them the choice. The older teacher that's been under the step and lane system for a long time and it's at the top of the salary range is probably not going to want to change. But the new ones are going to be under the new system, and the people that are in the middle are going to have a choice. And we think that that's a great way to handle it. I think it treats teachers fairly, and it gives them a choice of adopting the new system. It's a little bit like Sam Allen from John Deere told me how John Deere got competitive in their wage and salary structure. In 1997, they were able to get the UAW to work with them to come up with a new system for compensating new employees. And when I was down in Ottumwa for their 100th anniversary of the Ottumwa Works, Sam Allen told me they now have 85 to 90% of their people have been hired since '97. And they are now world-class competitive. They are, and I own some stock, and I can tell you they're doing well. And that's unlike the American auto industry that didn't make the adjustments and changes and went broke. So I believe that we can and will make a difference if we work together on this. And the UAW became their partner. Now, they had to make some tough decisions that weren't easy for the union. But the result is they've got jobs, and John Deere's hiring people in Ankeny right now. And John Deere's building a new plant in Harbin, China, where I was just recently. And so I think, we've got to look at that in education, too. We can't just do things the way we did them 90 years ago.
Was there discussion about kids spending more time in school? I mean, why not ask the legislature to extend beyond 180 days?
Well, part of this does have longer times for teachers and for administrators, as I understand it, and Linda, maybe you can help me with some of the details, but part of the new compensation system envisions teachers working longer and serving as mentors and master teachers as well as part of that effort. And that's also part of the effort to make sure that every kid is mastered reading before they leave 3rd grade. So we may well have to put some summer school and things into that to make sure that they achieve at that level.
That kids would be required to spend more time in class, though? That's not.
Well, under the four-tiered teacher proposal, apprentice and career teachers would work an additional 5 days, mentor teachers an additional 10 days, and master teachers an additional 20 days. And what that opens up is the opportunity for students to provide more help to students who need additional help. The summer school reading program for students who aren't able to read by the end of 3rd grade would probably be optional for those families, but something we strongly encourage.
Is this going to cost more money, or is that a factor in this?
Oh, yes. Well, first and foremost,
Are you gonna have to ask for more money?
well, first and foremost, we had to get the state's financial house in order first. And for the first time in a long time, we're not facing a gigantic projected deficit for the next fiscal year that the legislature is going to have to spend the whole session messing around with. That's the reason why I wanted to have a budget that was balanced, that spent less than we took in, and was basically a 2-year budget. Now, the amount, and first of all, we don't know. I'm actually pretty optimistic, considering that when I was governor before, agriculture was the weakest part of the economy, and now it's the strongest part of the economy. I happen to think agriculture is doing fairly well, and we're going to see maybe revenues a little better than expectations. We won't, and we have to put the budget together based on the December revenue estimate. So we won't know that until December. We won't submit our budget and recommendations on that until probably just January.
Long
But,
range.
long range, absolutely. But we also put together a 5-year budget plan that is sustainable, that spends less than we take in each year. And we did that anticipating that we want to invest in some critical areas. But I would also point out 58% of the state budget's already going to education. And we want to look at and strategically reallocate those funds to things that are going to get us the best results in terms of student achievement. Not just do things the way we've done it for the last 90 years, but look to a different and a better way of providing funding for education.
So in 3-5 years, what percentage of the state's budget would you expect to be spent on education versus 58?
Well, it's 58% now. I would think it'll be over 60%. And, you know, we've got another big challenge, and a lot of it depends on if Obamacare is repealed or not. If it's not, we're going to be stuck with a huge cost from Medicaid. And every governor is concerned about this because it's going to expand the number of people on Medicaid by at least 100,000. And the federal government says they're going to pay for it, but they're broke. And they're not going to do it. They're not going to be able to afford to do it. So it's going to fall on the burden of the states. When I was governor before, Medicaid was 12% of the budget. It's now about 25% of the budget. And so we've got to control that area too. But our initiative there is the healthiest state in the nation initiative. And if we, and I'm hopeful that we can essentially get that through our healthiest state in the nation initiative and other that we can get significant waiver from some of the onerous requirements of the federal law to give us an opportunity to do something really innovative in this state in health. And let me just talk a little bit about health care, since that, because that's the other really competing item for the budget. If we can do that, and this is a state with only 2 medical schools, and we've got 2 major health systems, the Mercy system and the Iowa Health System, and I served on the Iowa Health System board for 8 years. So I know something about that. And the University of Iowa has a large hospital, teaching hospital. But that's a small enough group, and we have historically been one of the lowest cost states in terms of delivering health care. If we can build on that and come up with our own system and one that really focuses on getting individuals to take ownership of their own health and doing those things they need to do in terms of nutrition and exercise to help control their costs in the long term, I think we have a better chance than almost anywhere else to try to hold those costs down so that education can get a bigger share of the budget. But that's the big thing that competes with it.
I mean, that quickly, most of the Medicaid dollars are spent on seniors and nursing homes in Iowa. I mean, they're not.
That's one of the reasons why we're recognizing the 100-year-olds that are living at home.
Right, but you know, you're still going to have to pay for that long-term care.
Well, one of the things we need to do is try to help people live longer and healthier and out of nursing homes. A certain amount of people, are going to need to be served in nursing homes, but there has already been a significant reduction on the number of people that are going to nursing homes. So you have many other services short of full skilled nursing care that can be provided too. And that's what I want. That's why I think we really want to focus on all those things that we can do there, and recognizing we're going to meet those obligations. In fact, you know, that's the real big item in this year's budget. Last year they used $540 million of one-time money for Medicaid. The reason why we didn't have any money to do a lot in education and other things in this year's budget, we had to plug that gap. We did it. And we did it, I think, in a very thoughtful way. Had to make some tough decisions, but that's why I asked Chuck Palmer to come back, because he's got both compassion and fiscal discipline, and he helped us put together a plan to meet our Medicaid obligations. But on the horizon in 2014 is the Obama health care mandate that we think really sinks us if we don't get that dramatically either repealed or dramatically reformed or changed, or unless we get an opportunity to essentially get a waiver that lets us try a different direction.
So getting back to education, what in your view have been some of the greatest structural weaknesses of the state's educational system that need addressing?
Well, the fact that we haven't changed, the way that we're still doing things the way we've always done them, whereas other states have put in place reforms. The first thing, we were about the last state in the nation to accept state standards. Then you also need to have effective assessments aligned with those standards. I think you need to have a much better system of preparing people to be teachers and administrators. From my experience at Des Moines University, I'm a big believer in clinical education. They don't teach clinical education in law school. You got to learn that on your own. But in medical school, you have all this hands-on experience. It's working with mentor doctors in hospitals and clinics and whatever. So when a doctor graduates, and after they graduate, then they got to go out and do their residency. It's another 3 to 5 years. And so they really have a lot of hands-on experience and know what they're doing. We need to do more of that. Not they have to have a full-blown clinical experience quite like they have in the medical school, but I think a much stronger clinical experience for people that are in colleges of education. We also need to have higher standards and higher expectations for those people who are going to be accepted into the colleges of education. But that's the reason for this new salary system, where there's an opportunity for the really best quality teachers to be able to move up from apprentice to career teacher and eventually to mentor and master teacher, and not have to spend 30 years in the classroom to get there.
So when the legislature convenes next January, are you going to have a package of legislation ready to go to start down
Yes.
this road, and what is that going to look like
Well,
in year one?
Well, first of all, we intend to put together a comprehensive plan and a budget to support it, to dramatically reform and transform education in a systemic way. We don't know exactly what the details are. That's why we're going about this in a very, I'd say, thoughtful, systematic way, recognizing we got to build consensus around the structure and the changes that are necessary, and then we also have to provide the financial support for it. And we also don't expect to accomplish all of this in 1 year. This will be done over a period of years. So, but I think we need to put the reforms and the direction in place, and then provide the funding as we go forward over the next 3-4 years.
In your mind, where do you want to start first? I mean, assuming you...
Well, I think this is the blueprint right here.
But I mean, where do you start with the blueprint? I mean,
Well, I think what we want...
Teacher education piece, or is it...
Well, the teacher education is kind of out of our control. That's more with the state universities and the private college universities that are preparing the teachers. So we need to work with them to try to address that issue. Some of that we can do, I think, through the State Board of Education and its requirements. But to some degree, we've got to work with the colleges and universities in that score. But so that's part of it. But then part of it is also having a new compensation system that will motivate new teachers and make the teaching profession more attractive by a higher beginning salary for the new teachers. And yet at the same time, we want to give teachers the choice so that you've had somebody who's been on in the system a long time, in the step and lane system, that doesn't want to go to the new system. They don't have to. So I think it's designed to try to put together something that's workable and it will transform our system, but a little bit like John Deere did when they decided they wanted to become world-class competitive and made the changes.
So do you change the compensation system first then? Is that what?
Well, that's part. Yeah. Well, I think first of all, we don't want to pass a piecemeal thing. We want to try to do a systematic reform that includes all of that, includes the innovation items as well, and the one of the things that's been mentioned is that every 11th grader would take the ACT exam, and the state would pay for that.
In your circles, in your circles, can you talk a little bit about how education has become more than just preparing kids for the next generation or so, but it's also an economic development tool in this whole global economy that we're in? How does that play a factor into this?
Well, it's all you have to do is take a trip like the Lieutenant Governor did last spring, or that I just came back from, and see what's going on in Asia, and you will see what the competition is like. You know, it used to be we say, well, our problem was cheap labor in China. Let me tell you, I went to a soybean processing plant where they're making soy milk and tofu, and this was first of all, a very clean facility. Secondly, extremely mechanized. So it's not like the old days. When I went to China in '84, I went to a textile mill, and it was dusty and noisy, and there was a lot of people there. Today, it's a much different situation, and that's China. That's our competition. But Korea, Japan, Singapore, that's what it's like in the world today, and we have got to compete with that. And those countries put huge emphasis on math and science, and their achievement scores are much higher than ours, and that's what we've got to compete with. So we've got to have a world-class education system that motivates and challenges our kids to achieve at the highest level possible, because that's what we're competing with for the jobs of the future.
How are you feeling about free universal preschool these days?
I think we reached a compromise during the last session of the legislature. The one item that's in this is to say that we want to do an assessment to make sure every child is ready to learn when they start kindergarten. So that's basically the recommendation we have dealing with the preschool.
Governor, we tend to export our college grads, including new teachers, to states that pay more. Are you confident that we're going to be able to get the starting salary high enough that people will stay here even if they have to meet stiffer requirements to qualify?
Yes, I think it'll be attractive because it's not only the beginning salary, but this opportunity to move up in a quicker level than be stuck in the system that has had the step and lanes where you have to be there for 25 or 30 years before you get to a really competitive salary system. So we want a new teacher to be able to see, yeah, it's going to be a better beginning salary, but also I have an opportunity within 5 years to make another step, and probably another step within another 5, and be in a position where I can be a mentor teacher and make a difference with other new people that are coming into the profession. So we make it really more of a profession, and teachers more feeling ownership in their profession and the impact they can have.
Are there any opportunities for alternative certification or alternative, to attract people who
Yes.
who are not just college grads, but people who've worked and retired engineer or
Yes, and a lot of states have done that, and we do have provisions for that, for alternative certification for teachers and administrators. Also, there's the idea of adjunct. Right now, adjunct faculty is essentially, we had adjunct faculty at Des Moines University that helped teach maybe just a day or two a year. But this would provide an opportunity for somebody that's a high school teacher that could then be an adjunct faculty for these students that are doing practice teaching. And right now, a lot of the practice...
I'm thinking the other way around. Why can't someone who teaches at DMAC teach at East High School?
And well, we have provisions for that as well. And Linda, I don't know if you have any more detail on that.
Yeah, well, we're looking at how to open up alternative certification and more than basically the one way we have now. Right now, you have to take a number of classes, leave your mid-career profession, take a number of classes, then go teach for a year, then take more classes, and maybe at the very soonest you could become a teacher in 18 months. We're looking at how you can move someone who is highly qualified and stands to be a very good teacher into the classroom and then help them develop the pedagogical skills that they need as they move forward in teaching along with their content skills. I mean, we set a very high bar for who gets to do that, so we'd be sure students had highly qualified teachers, but we don't want to make it, we want to make it easier for highly qualified people who want to teach.
What's at stake for the state if this doesn't happen this time, Governor?
Well, if we have a second-class education, if we don't provide the opportunity for our kids to be able to compete in this world economy, then I think we saddled them with, if you don't have the right job skills, you're going to get a lower-paying job, and it's going to handicap you the rest of your life. So I think it's really important. And I think also, and I was just up at Iowa State, the Lieutenant Governor and I were both there on Friday for the groundbreaking of this whole, biosciences complex that they're building up there. And they've just chosen a new president, Stephen Leith. And I think he's the right guy at the right time. He's coming with a research background, who's done some very innovative things in North Carolina. And I think and Iowa State can play a very key role as and you maybe noticed their enrollment has gone up very dramatically, especially in engineering and in agriculture. And those are in biosciences. We are, because we grow the corn and soybeans, and when people want to move away from petroleum-based products to bio-based products, we have the great opportunity to have a lot of that development in those jobs here in Iowa, and those are great jobs. But we have to make sure that we have the math and science and the other skill sets that our kids are learning for those jobs of the future right here in the state of Iowa. And I think the educational component is critically important for that to succeed.
Governor, do you think anything in this set of reforms would either accelerate or decelerate school consolidation around the state?
First of all, it's been accelerating in recent years, and I think it's the whole thing with school consolidation really revolves around whether a school district has the resources to provide a quality education to their kids. And Iowa, and we're seeing a lot of partnering and a lot of sharing. For instance, I was in eastern Iowa, in Monticello. There's 6 small school districts that have gone together with Kirkwood Community College to offer some higher level math and science courses and some vocational courses at one site. So they go to their own school, but then they go part of the day there. I think we're going to see more of those kinds of things. Part of it is you can't solve it all with consolidation, or you'll have kids on buses for 2 and 4 hours a day. Well, actually 2 hours each way. So you can only do so much that way, but also there's a lot you can do also using technology to deliver course opportunities for kids that otherwise wouldn't have it if they live in a small rural district. I was the author of open enrollment way back when, to give parents a choice if they didn't feel the quality of their school system was adequate to send them to a neighboring district. And it's because I had Lakota and Buffalo Center, and we had parents who were paying tuition to send their kids to Buffalo Center because they weren't satisfied with the quality. And eventually what happened is, and now that's the North Iowa School District, and so you've got Lakota, Ledyard, Rake, Thompson, and all with Buffalo Center, the North Iowa School District. My friend was Larry Hill was the superintendent of the year a couple of years ago from that school district. So, So there's some of that's already occurred in the state of Iowa in places like that district, and there will be more that will occur, but I don't think that's a panacea for our problem, and this I don't think is going to have a big impact on it one way or the other. I really think the bigger impact is going to be, can we grow the economy, can we create the jobs, can we have enough young people in those school districts that they can provide a quality education. So it kind of fits together, and the more we can attract bioscience companies and other companies to locate in communities like Osage and Eddyville, places like that, the more likely we are to save those school districts.
Governor, do you envision any backlash against any of these proposals, specifically the social promotion at third grade, and if so, are you willing to
Sure.
change, your...
Well, first of all, we anticipate there will be plenty of people that want to protect the status quo. The status quo is always the easy alternative, but I don't think we can afford the easy alternative. I think we've got to challenge ourselves to make thoughtful changes that are systemic and that are going to make a real difference. And if there's some of these proposals that, well, first of all, just because we run into resistance is no reason not to do it. I guess to those people that say we ought to continue social promotion, I would say, well, compare us to Florida and look what's happened in Florida since they changed to this new approach, and how Florida has made dramatic changes in a state that historically has not done well in education, where they have a lot of English as second language learners, but they've done it. And so we can't use as an excuse we have more second language students anymore. If they can do it in Florida, we ought to be able to do it here.
In fact, it was that population that seen tremendous
Right.
growth.
Yeah, in fact,
it really helped.
We can give you the statistics on that. I think, Linda, you probably have those at the tip of your tongue.
I do, if you want them now, or I can tell you afterwards, whatever you prefer.
Governor, I'd like to ask you a funding equity
Sure.
question. There's always tension if you're going to try
Right.
to deal with more funding for education between how much the state will provide in the funding formula and how much goes on the property taxpayer.
Right.
You made a run at trying to change how property taxes were handled here in Iowa last year. It didn't go anywhere. Are you going to try to make another run at that?
Well, first of all, I've spent my whole political career making runs at that, and we're not done. I can tell you that for sure. Now, you need to know, when I came to the legislature in the 1970s, 80% of the cost of education was on the back of the property taxpayers, and only about 20% state aid. And with the 10% across the board cut in 2009 and in 2010, they purposely underfunded the school aid formula. We did make dramatic progress on that this year. We fully funded the school aid formula. So we didn't push it onto the backs of property taxes. We also assured people there would not be an across-the-board cut because we passed a sustainable budget. So I think that's a pretty important and significant step forward. In the long term, I would like to see us continue to reduce our dependency on property taxes. Probably the next step in that is going to be the mental health. And we did that also when I was governor before, but we're looking at a comprehensive reform of the mental health system to provide more equity and also to reduce our dependency on property tax. But we intend to, in terms of education, I think, continue to look at that as well. The property tax is, the problem with property tax is I think it's a very poor way to fund education. Now, maybe back in 1900, whatever, it wasn't so bad because property was probably one of the few indicators of wealth. But today, just because you own property doesn't mean you have the ability to pay those taxes. So I think we do need to continue. I think we did make progress this year, and I'm hopeful in the future we can do more. The school aid formula is one of the ways that we have, we're now, I said it was 20% then. I think it was 60% state aid when I left office before. And so I don't know where we are now, but we lost some ground the last couple of years. I think we've made that back up. I'm hopeful we can do more in the future.
Would you ever see the state going whole hog on state aid to schools, just eliminate the property tax piece?
Well, we have the $5.40 per thousand uniform levy. That seems to be pretty well accepted, and we're now up to, what is it, 87.5%? Is that the top end?
Yeah, that's what I think.
So I think where most people are coming from on that is to eventually move that 87.5%, and we were, when I was governor before, we were moving that up, and eventually get that to 100%. So that would.
So 540 would be the most that any taxpayer would.
Yeah.
And why that? Why not eliminate it?
Well,
what's magic about that?
there's probably nothing magic about that, but if you're talking about eliminating that altogether, and a lot of that money is going to come out of property-rich rural districts, is where it's coming from, because that's what I used to represent when I was a state representative. I know where it comes from. Then you're going to have to come up with a lot more state money. And the question is, how are you going to come up with a lot more state money?
It's the easiest way to do property tax relief. It's the simplest way to do it.
What's the simplest way to do property tax relief?
No, this is.
The school aid formula. Well, it's one of them. But I can tell you a few other things. We used to fund the court system out of property tax. And if you had, and I can tell you this is a real case. There was a murder in Gitche 102 State Park in Lyon County. The perpetrators and the victims were all from South Dakota. But the property taxpayers in Lyon County had to pay all the costs of the whole legal system, all the way to the appeals to the Supreme Court and everything like that came out of property tax. So we eliminated, the state took over the cost of funding the court system. We did that in my first term. We did it on 4 steps over a 4-year period. But that was a very inequitable thing. Another one is the mental health thing. We made progress in that back in the 90s. I believe now's the time, and there's still, about $100 million annually that comes out of property taxes for mental health. I think that's another one that can be addressed. In addition to the school aid formula, the school aid formula being the biggest one. But and that started, I want to give credit to Governor Ray and the Republican legislature in 1969, because I think they started the school aid formula that began that phase out that got us from the 20% state aid to where we are today.
Governor, if you would permit me to go off topic for a minute. How well do you know Governor Chris Christie? Do you think he would make a good president? And do you think he's going to run?
Well, Chris Christie came in and did a fundraiser for me. And the lieutenant governor was there. This was, 10 days before the election for us? He gave a very inspirational speech. I'm very impressed with what he's done in New Jersey. He inherited a real fiscal mess. The state's got a lot of problems. They've had a history of corruption. They've had budget problems that are much worse than what we have. He's bit the bullet. He's made the tough decisions. He's balanced the budget without raising taxes. He just got his legislature controlled by the other party to pass major reform of their retirement system. And I was on the trade mission, so I didn't see his speech, but I heard that he gave a very inspirational speech out at the Reagan Library. And he's got the guts to do what a lot of politicians will love to tell you all the good things, but he'll give you kind of the unvarnished truth about the realities of the fiscal situation. And I think this country is headed in the wrong direction. You cannot increase the national debt $1.4, $1.3, $1.2 trillion year after year, or we're going to be where Greece and these other countries are in Europe. We're going to have to make a dramatic change in the way we do things, and I think he's certainly one that's willing to face that. And he's shown at the state level. And what's interesting, it's what he's done, other governors are doing of both parties. I follow what Governor Cuomo's doing in New York. 3-year salary freeze for public employees and have them pick up part of their health insurance. Now, he got the union leadership to agree to that. I don't think the rank and file has approved it. So if they don't approve it, they'll have to do massive layoffs. In Illinois, the Democratic governor, and I can talk about my Republican colleagues from Ohio to Wisconsin to Michigan, all across the board are doing those kinds of things. And probably in giving due credit, I ought to say the governor of Indiana started it, because he was the first to really recognize that we had more government we can afford and we have to make big changes in it. And I think what he did, then Chris Christie and Bob McDonnell did in Virginia, and I think that's what the governors are doing today is what the nation's going to have to do as well in the very near future.
Social issues, you don't think he's too centrist to environment?
Well, I think the number one issue today is getting the nation back on, well, I think jobs is probably the number one issue in most people's mind. But I think you also we have to have our fiscal house in order. A lot of businesses are afraid to invest in America today because our fiscal house is in such a mess and our taxes are so high. When I was governor before, we got, I think, 6 automotive component parts companies from Canada located in Iowa. We got IPSCO Steel, made a $500 million investment here. We got Skyjack, which makes the lift. We got all kinds of Canadian companies located in Iowa. That was then. 4 weeks ago, I was in Chicago, called on a company, trying to get them to move the operation to Iowa. And they said, you know, we like what you have to say, but the federal corporate income tax is so high that we're thinking of maybe move our whole operation to Canada. Now, when I was governor before, the Canadian dollar was worth about 65 cents to the American dollar. And now it's worth $1.20. The Canadian financial system wasn't as strong as ours, and their taxes were higher. But now their corporate taxes are, nationally are 15%, or 18%. They're going to 15% next year. So I just think we need to recognize that we're in worldwide competition, and I think you've got to reform that corporate tax structure. What's interesting is when they reduced the capital gains tax last time, from what was it, 28% or something like to 15 and 10%. The amount of money that came in almost tripled. And you know why? Because the loopholes that are in the law, people use a 1031 exchange to exchange from one to another and pay no tax. And so what you got to do is, in my mind, is you got to have somebody that has the courage to make the tough decisions fiscally, but also those kind of decisions that make us competitive in terms of jobs. And he's not the only one. There's others. I think there's others that are certainly talking about that as well.
We wrote yesterday about lawmaker compensation, and next Sunday we're writing about the benefits. The part-time legislature, almost all of them use the state employee health insurance, and 90 of them use the free plan. Do you think that's too generous for a part-time legislature?
I think it's too generous, period. I think it's too generous, period. I think it needs to be changed. I think people ought to have to pay something towards their health insurance. Most people do. I don't think public employees, including legislators, ought to get a free ride. I think they ought to contribute towards it. And I think also when you have some skin in the game, then you're also going to be a little more careful about not abusing it.
Do you remember, someone said it may have been under you, do you remember how the lawmakers ended up getting on to the union negotiated benefits? Is that something?
Oh, well, you know, it's kind of the tail wagging the dog. You have a situation where the union gets it, so then everybody else says, well, we should get it too. So, and that's my point, and that's why I was so upset when my predecessor, instead of turning over the negotiations to me, because I made it clear in the campaign, I thought people ought to be contributing towards their health insurance. There's no doubt of where I stood on that issue. So there was no negotiations. They just took the demand and stuck us with it. Not only that, that was on top of what they did the previous year. Now, the health insurance thing was just approved for the coming, and we're fortunate that the increase in cost of the state is not going to be too great. However, you know, the sweetheart deal they did in 2010, where they let people that had worked for the state for 25 years, they gave them $5,000 a year for the next 5 years, plus pay all their health insurance. That's costing us big bucks, and it's going to go up every year.
And then he came back and worked again.
I assume you're on the state healthcare plan then?
Yes.
Do you know how much you pay toward your healthcare insurance?
I don't, but I, you know, and I, but I.
You have some skin in the game, though. You're pretty.
Well,
Sure.
no, well, let me just say this: compared to Des Moines University, it's a much richer health plan than we had at Des Moines University. Now,
You're on one of the free plans then, either Blue Access or Blue Advantage?
I honestly don't know, but I assume so.
But you don't have a premium, a monthly premium?
Actually, I get, you know, I don't get a check stub. It's automatically deposited in my account, and I haven't looked at it, but I will. But I assume, I just, and I don't think it's right, and I think it ought to be changed, and I'm an advocate for changing it. But I don't think it ought to just be changed for legislators or for the governor. I think it ought to be changed for everybody.
But that's how it worked. I mean, you basically gave what the unions got, what ASCME got, you gave to the rest of the employee unions.
Well,
and the ones who don't bargain. I mean, didn't they basically set the tone for all state employees?
well, that's the problem. But here's the point that I think is, and I'll just tell you, there were years that they didn't give it to the non-contract. Then you really have problems. When you start discriminating against people because they don't belong to the union, then you're trying to force everybody into the union. Now, that was done under my predecessor. I think it's absolutely wrong. First of all, I would never have agreed to a contract without a counteroffer. That was wrong. Then it would compound it if we then say, oh, but you that are not in the union, we're going to discriminate against you. The unions get this, you don't. And we looked at that, and we analyzed it, and we said, is there a better way we can do it? And we think in the short term, that would have created more problems in state government and really created more controversy and hard feelings. And I'm not about doing that. I want to treat people fairly.
But should lawmakers who are part-time
No.
workers in Iowa, should they even have this option, do you know?
Well, I think they should have the option to have health insurance. I don't think it ought to be free.
So should other part-time state employees have full benefits coverage?
Well, legislators are not just part-time. I mean, they only work, they work year-round, even though, and Kim can maybe help answer that, because you do a lot of constituent work when you're not in session.
Legislator, it's not just while you're in session. I mean, you work year-round, and you're accessible year-round, and you're answering emails and constituent calls, and you're calling on business and companies, and you're in the district, so you're traveling.
So you can't have another job then anymore?
It's really tough, but you can. I think a lot of them do, but it's probably part-time, or it's something that they're, I was going to try to do a part-time job, and it just really wasn't feasible. It's not, your employer has to be pretty open to flexibility, because you're gone a lot. If you're doing a good job, you need to be representing I represented 7 counties in southwest Iowa, so I had a lot of territory to cover.
And so we need to come up with an equitable system, and I've talked to legislators that feel the same way. They don't think it's right or fair that they ought to be paying nothing towards their health insurance. I don't think it's right that any of our, I don't think it's right that.
Well, how did that happen that they got it?
How did that happen?
Yeah. They voted for it, right?
Well, at some point, I think what happened is this. It was a situation where they said, well, this is what the union got, so we're going to give that to everybody. And I understand the idea behind saying we're not going to, but the point is the union should have never gotten it either. And we certainly need to change that. And maybe in 1975 it wasn't so bad because it wasn't that costly.
Right. I think it's a
That's
long-standing
the
thing,
problem.
and
That-
I think pay structure for government officials was very low at the time, and
So
so
it
you could
was a
see some,
benefit
yeah.
that you
So, yeah, that's exactly what happened. So this, remember, collective bargaining started in the mid-70s, and that time, now we got a situation where public employees make more than comparable jobs in the private sector, and their benefits are way higher than the private sector. And that's what's got to change. So we're in a different environment. It's a different era. And so we're, state after state is recognizing that. We're just really slow to.
Just for the record, I think you will hear from AFSCME a response to that. When they say if you compare overall public employees overall to private sector, you may be right, but if you compare job to
Well, we can
job
compare-
category.
I can tell you what.
They have brought the documentation in.
I disagree with it. And I think we can put together documentation that show they're paid a lot better and the benefits are a lot better. I can tell you the people that work for me, I probably better not use names, but because I don't want to get anybody in trouble. But people that work for me that worked in state government and then went to the private sector, the salary situation, what they're paying in state government is much higher than the private sector, much higher, especially for the lower level jobs. Now, if you're a department head, you're probably not paid comparable to what somebody in the private sector would make with somebody that has that much responsibility.
You have a personal example of that, don't you?
Yeah, but I took a significant pay cut to do this. I don't spend a lot of time talking about that because I did this because I felt a calling to do it, and because I felt a calling to public service, and I'm willing to make a sacrifice to do it. I want to make a difference, and there's a lot of people that are, want to find, when you're the governor, you're the target. I understand that, and people want to play gotcha stuff, but the fact of the matter is, I'm doing this because I love it, because I think I can make a difference, and I'm really proud of the people I've been able to attract to state government to help me do it, and we're on a mission, and we're on a mission to make a difference. And I think we're off to a good start. We still have a long ways to go, but my enthusiasm has not been diminished by the challenges that I've faced to date.
Governor, I have one last question before Tim hauls you out of here. If the governor of New Jersey is on the DesMoinesRegister.com right now and he's watching this, what's your message to the good governor of New Jersey about the possibility of him running and
I
entering the
think
race?
he ought to do what he thinks is right for himself and for the country.
Do you want him to run?
I'd love to see him run, but I also respect the fact that he said no many, many times. But I think there's a lot of people out there, including the woman that made the impassionate plea out there at the Reagan Presidential Library, that feel that he's got what it takes to do this job.
Do you agree with it?
Certainly from what I've seen. The presentation he made at our fundraiser was the most inspired I've been since I heard Ronald Reagan. And I think he also did a great job at the Education Summit. So, I've watched him on the internet and some other things, and the way he's handled. He keeps his cool. He handles tough, mean questions. And now people are going after him because of his weight and stuff like that. And he knows he's going to have to put up with all that kind of nonsense and abuse. Knowing full well that's the situation, I think he's got to decide, is this the thing that he should do?
Has he contacted you in the past week or two?
No. I've been out of the country most of the time, but no, he has not contacted me in the last week or two. Okay, thank you very much.
Good seeing you again. Thanks for coming in. We really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thank you.